Hi, this is Richard Jacobs from myduiattorney.org, and I'm here today with Kevin Leckerman, a criminal attorney out of New Jersey. And Mr. Leckerman specializes in DWI law in New Jersey, and he's agreed today to take time and do an interview with me. And I appreciate you being here, Mr. Leckerman. Thank you.
Thank you.
And without delay, let's just get to the questions. I don't have a lot today, but the first question I have is that it seems like most people think that a DWI charge can't be fought and won. Is that true?
No, not at all. Actually, there are many ways to fighting a DWI charge. In any DWI prosecution, especially in New Jersey, they're going to be utilizing a number of variables in their prosecution. One would be field sobriety tests. Second would be the breath testing unit that they're utilizing in New Jersey now, which is the Alka-Test device. And if there's an accident that's involved, typically they're going to be taking blood samples or perhaps urine samples. So from the beginning of any case, you want to look at a number of issues, and one certainly would be with the field sobriety testing that was done,
Okay.
and then go into the actual scientific or so-called scientific testing that's taken place for your client. When I have a client who calls me, I go through a whole series of questions. We spend a reasonable amount of time discussing not only the case itself, but we go into a lot of details concerning that person's past. So in my process of finding out about the case and my client, I want to delve into not only the issues with the investigation, but also the issues that could have, in a sense, influenced the decision of the police officer in a way that if the court or the prosecutor, prior to actually taking the case to court, knows the full amount of information regarding my client, that in many cases can be persuasive in deciding whether or not the prosecution wants to take this case past the initial charging stage and maybe take the case to trial. And utilizing that information, I try to get the prosecutor to essentially reevaluate the case and potentially dismiss that DWI charge.
Okay, that's very interesting. So your first focus of attack is on the prosecutor before you even get to whether they're going to charge the client or they're going to take him to trial, but you're trying to stop the whole process there, it sounds like.
Well, sometimes. Usually in New Jersey, when I'm called, it's because the person has already been taken in and charged and they have a court date in a couple of days or so. On occasion, there is time between the actual incident itself and whether or not a police department is going to charge somebody. For the most part, I am dealing with a case that has already been charged, and I'm trying to then put together an attack, essentially, against the prosecutor's case before we even get to the first court date. So you mentioned the word attack, and that's essentially how I approach these cases. I don't sit back and defend a DWI charge because, frankly, in New Jersey, you're not going to get anywhere if you're just sitting back waiting for the prosecution to hand to you a deal. In fact, in New Jersey, they don't give you deals. They're not supposed to give you deals. It's prohibited for a prosecutor to negotiate a DWI charge. So therefore, the primary goal of a DWI attorney and my primary objective is to essentially attack that case that they put together, which is generally one that doesn't delve into anything past the field sobriety testing, the driving behavior that was noted, and the scientific testing. So they're not really digging into anything more than that. And my approach is to get as much information from my client as possible. Go beyond just finding out whether or not the police did the field sobriety test properly, or did they go through the proper procedures for breath testing or blood testing. That's absolutely essential in any DWI attack. But what I move into, what I really want to know when I'm talking to a client beyond the initial stages of preparing for a DWI attack is to really find out the past history of that person. If that person has any physical conditions, whether they be acute at the time or chronic conditions that could have affected the ability to operate the car, ability to do these balance tests or field sobriety tests, ability to blow into the machine and give an adequate breath sample. Sometimes people are charged with refusal because the machine didn't get a required sufficient breath sample, and there could be physiological issues that have prohibited that person from actually giving an adequate breath sample, and I want to find that information out.
Okay.
There could be interference with the machine itself, and that could be due to a number of gastrointestinal issues as well. So those are just a few examples of what I want to know about my client when I'm initially interviewing and building a case.
Okay, so it sounds like you take a lot of time up front, a lot of care, and really get into all the details possible to proceed. And that's very good to hear. My next question, which you probably have answered part of it, is how do you initially approach each DWI case besides what you've mentioned?
Well, aside from what I mentioned, I'm also looking into the certifications for the officers concerning the field sobriety test. So, for instance, in New Jersey, they are typically using 3 types of field sobriety tests. Those are known as standardized field sobriety tests. It's a one-leg stand, walk and turn test, and a horizontal gaze nystagmus test. Well, in New Jersey, the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, the results of that are not allowed into evidence in the prosecution. However, they can be used for probable cause. So when I'm trying to build a defense, build an attack, of course I want to find out information regarding the qualifications of the officer who did the initial testing, because that is going to be a large foundation, essentially, that the prosecution uses to form their probable cause to arrest and then go on to the so-called more reliable scientific testing. So if you can really delve into the qualifications of that officer and the problems that typically occur with the administration of these field sobriety tests, then that's going to help in potentially getting rid of the entire charge, even on a probable cause challenge, and if not through probable cause, at least sufficiently weakening the prosecution's case later on if the case has to go to trial. Another issue that I will look into, as I mentioned before, is does the client have any problems, physical problems that could have resulted in an artificially inflated breath testing result? So I'm looking into gastrointestinal problems. I'm looking into issues with dental problems. I'm looking into issues with whether or not there were objects that the person had in his or her mouth, meaning mints or gum, within a 20-minute period prior to giving a first breath sample. So if there were those types of issues, then automatically I can at least mention to my client that, hey, we have something to work with here, and that we essentially can fight this case and perhaps do have an excellent chance of persuading the prosecutor to dismiss based on the evidence that we're presenting, or at least, if we have to take the matter to trial, present a very strong defense.
Okay. Yeah, what you're saying gives me the feeling that you're turning the investigation back on your attackers, on the prosecutor. You're investigating the police officer. You're investigating all this stuff. So I would get a good feeling if I was talking to you because of the way you're presenting it. Just want to let you know. My next question is, and again, you may have answered this too, is what are some of the common problems that you find in the DWI cases that you handle?
Well, with the field sobriety testing, once I find out the qualifications of the officer, we're also going to be getting information, whether it be from a videotape recording of the event itself, or at least information in the police officer's report concerning how the tests were administered and the results of those tests.